Welcome back, everybody, to this edition of Popcorn Diaries. I'm Joe.
And I'm Adriana.
And today we are going to be talking about special effects. Special effects have been used in cinema since 1895, which is pretty much the birth of cinema, if you will. Adriana, what do you got for us?
Well, as you said, special effects started as soon as Hollywood began crunching out movies. We were always looking for ways to make movies better, to bring to life those stories that needed a little push. Some of the earlier works were actually cartoon illustrations used as special effects in movies. So we had quite a few little stop motions done with a lot of illustrations from cartoons. And then I know there's one that you want to talk about that came out early on.
And that would be George Méliès, who is considered by many to be the father of special effects. He pretty much was the first one to get recognized for doing things like stop action, fast and slow motion perspective tricks and that. And his background came from him being an illusionist. He took those skills and discovered that he could do some pretty cool things with cinema. Probably his most famous movie is Trip to the Moon, 1902. That was a spectacular hit. If you've never seen it, get it. It's cool. It's amazing what he did back then with the technology that was available.
Yeah, there's actually snippets of this, or actually recreations of this, woven into one of the Smashing Pumpkins music videos, if you remember. Around that same era, the early dawn of Hollywood, we also had some improvements that were made by a gentleman named Norman Don. He perfected a technique for matte painting, and matte painting was very popular back when special effects first started. It was the only way that you could really create special effects back then. So he actually, before Norman, they used to just block out certain areas with cardboard. And he perfected the technique by using glass. And for many, many years, his technique was the one used in Hollywood to get that great shot for then matte painting to be applied to it. So that was pretty much leading up all the way through the 20s. Then we moved into another era where we had a lot of little miniatures. We had matte painting going on at the same time. And one of the best movies that came out around that era, 1927, Metropolis.
Great movie.
Yes, German film by Franz Lang. He benefited off of the work of one Eugene Schuften, who pioneered an effect that was going to use for Gulliver's Travels, but was ended up using it for Metropolis, which was the use of mirrors to combine actors with the miniatures. And he perfected this technique so much that it became known as the Schuften process. So this was mainly used in Hollywood for quite a long time.
Well, I think one of the greatest movies back in the 30s that used exactly what you were talking about, among other special effects, stop motion miniatures, rear projection, compositing, using live actors or puppets, was the original King Kong from 1933. There's a couple of scenes there where you've got everything happening all in one scene. Even today when you watch it, you know what's going on, but it's very convincing. And you got to remember, that was back in the 1930s when this kind of thing was just not seen, on the screen at all.
No, it wasn't. And I mean, rear projection stuck around for quite a long time. It was the only way to kind of combine actors and footage seamlessly. But matte painting was still there for some periods. I mean, some of the greatest matte painting, if you recall, from Gone with the Wind. And then we had the Ten Commandments that had so many mattes in it. It was just spectacular. I mean,
still a great movie today.
Still a great movie today. People watch this movie year in, year out. And this movie stands up to the test of time. And you still watch this movie and you get little chills when he parts that Red Sea. And, it's such a great film. I mean, matte painting went all the way up to Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. We had that great, gorgeous matte painting with the warehouse scene.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes.
Such a seamless matte. It was gorgeously done. One of the best effects you see with matte painting. But you're right, rear projection took over. And then we had, if you really want to take a look at rear projection, just look at any action movie. All the car chase scenes used rear projection. And most of the early Bond films, that's what they were using to generate these great car chases.
Something that was done for, many decades, and that was the use of stop motion and miniatures, particularly in the 50s by the great Ray Harryhausen, who did Jason and the Argonauts. If you've never seen this movie, get this movie and keep an eye out for the skeleton scene. It's just absolutely amazing, even today when you watch it, to realize that had to be done frame by frame, and he had to move all these miniatures. And miniatures have been used very recently. The last movie I'm aware of was one of my favorites was Moon, 2009. All their moonscapes, that was not CGI. That was all miniatures that they had up there.
You can't talk about special effects without talking about some animatronics. And animatronics is a special branch of special effects, and you see it in so many different films to animate some type of alien movement characters or anything like that. But one of my favorite films of all time that encompasses just it's completely animatronics is Dark Crystal.
Oh, yeah, that's a great movie.
This was such an amazing film. You had these great characters created by Jim Henson's company. And I mean, Jim Henson is just the granddaddy of all animatronics. But I really, really love this film. This was such a beautiful project. And to this day, I still watch this film and still enjoy it.
Yeah, that is a great movie. And if you want to talk about animatronics, you can't talk about this without mentioning Jaws. That was a big, giant chunk of animatronic that they had trouble getting going. If you ever wondered why you don't see the shark for the first 45 minutes of the film, is because they could not get the thing to work. And that was not planned, but that's the way the movie came out, and it all for the better. And it turned out to be one of the scariest movies at that time period.
You have to remember that there are some moments that truly have serendipity behind them. And that shark not appearing in that film for 45 minutes really builds a level of tension because you're just waiting to see this huge monster, and you don't get to see it till like the film is almost halfway done. So yeah, that was, even though the shark didn't want to work, it turned out for the best.
Yeah, just imagine that movie if the shark, you would have seen it in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, it would have been completely different.
Yeah, it would have been like any stock horror movie these days where you see everything happen in the first 5 minutes. And then as we got into that time period of the 70s and in the 80s and, the Star Wars, of course, and that, we got into, what's called optical printing and compositing, and those were game changers. When Star Wars came out, 2001, of course, that was all optically printed with layers, if you will, on top of another and another, and they would film again and again and again and put all these layers together and composite, if you will, to get these just gorgeous scenes. So, CGI wasn't around yet, and some of those effects from even back then hold up today and look, just absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, definitely the 70s brought about a boom in special effects. Not only did you have, Star Wars, you had 2001 Space Odyssey, you had Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Close Encounters, yeah.
So you had all these films coming and pushing the barriers of special effects. We were starting to see more directors and producers and effect companies emerge and push the boundaries and really try to create a film that was not only believable, but that looked great when you saw it. And granted, there are some issues. I mean, if you watch these films now, you see some of the flaws behind the special effects. But for their time, they were innovative. They broke barriers. They went for it, and they created some great movies that today have such a great following.
And I think you hit it right on the head earlier when you said that that they're believable, that you buy into it. It's important to me that when I see a special effect, is it truly part of the story, or are they just using a special effect because they can? So when I see something on the screen, I say, look how realistic that is. I believe that this actually could happen. And unfortunately, there's a whole lot of movies out there that, don't get me.
Yeah, there are many movies out there that have some pretty bad special effects, or special effects that have fallen apart over the years. There's one that just comes to mind, and this was a highly stylized film when it came out. It looked amazing when it came out, but you watch it now and you can see every single detail of the special effects, which was Ultraviolet. That movie, just when it came out, you were just like shocked and amazed, and it looks so hyper realistic. But now you see it and you can just see every single particle, and you can see every single behind the scenes footage that they put in to create those effects.
Yeah, and if you stop believing that, this could, happen in the film, then you just lose it. You're done.
Yeah, once you see behind the curtain, there's no going back.
One of my favorite series of movies is the Mummies movies that came out a few years back. You got the mummy running around, and then there's the one scene in The Mummy Returns where they have The Rock playing the Scorpion King. And I don't know, can you call it CGI? I'm not even sure what you call it. It's so bad.
It's really badly composited. The lighting does not match. It looks like a plastic toy animated. I mean, you could have done a better job with stop motion character,
Absolutely. So when I see something like that, I'm usually done. That's it. I'm done watching the movie. It's all over.
And coming from such a blockbuster, you would expect higher level of special effects, especially because the first one, when you first were introduced to the mummy, he looked pretty disgusting, and you were pretty, grossed out.
With the little bugs running around and everything like that. It was pretty creepy.
But then you come back to the second movie, and the special effects fall apart. I just don't get that. Why would you go backwards?
I think it's important to mention that with special effects, it's not all about science fiction and space movies and that type of thing. There's a lot of movies out there that use special effects that are so transparent to us that we don't even know they occur. And that's when the real art of it comes out. I definitely picture someday in not too distant future where we're going to have a hard time picking out, was that actor real or was that actor composited up through CGI?
If you recall when the first Final Fantasy movie came out, that looked amazing. And by today's standards, it still kind of looks amazing. It may fall apart a little bit at the seams with the rendering, but it's still a gorgeous film. But there were moments where you just looked at this like, wow, is this kind of real or not? And if you look at that whole franchise, it's very hyper-realistic and it's very detailed, and they pay such attention to the character modeling that it's always comes out gorgeous. So I definitely agree with you. The lines are definitely blurring. There's so many effects that are composited and rendered with regular footage that just create these new and amazing worlds that we were never able to see before. But I do want to talk about one more thing before we get completely into CGI, and that's the makeup artistry that went behind a lot of films that would have never been possible if these great makeup artists weren't behind the scenes. And one makeup artist that I do have to bring up is Jack Pierce, who was most notable for his work in Frankenstein, White Zombie, The Mummy, Bride of Frankenstein, and The Wolfman. His rendition of The Wolfman is just gorgeous. And the amount of time it took to, stipple all that hair onto a character and bring to life this Wolfman was astounding for the time, because you're thinking these films were created between the 20s and the 40s.
Yeah, black and white.
All black and white, and it was such a challenge, but he did a phenomenal job bringing that Wolfman to life.
Yeah, I remember watching because that was Lon Chaney, who was the Wolfman, go from his character to the wolf. You just watch that and you say, how did they do that? And when he was done, the makeup on it was just incredible. I mean, it was a total transformation. No problem saying, yeah, this really happened.
Yeah, makeup artists in Hollywood really have their work cut out for them, especially special effects makeup artists. Stan Winston is another one that I have to bring up, and he worked on the Terminator, Aliens, Predator, Terminator 2, and Jurassic Park, and he did an exceptional job bringing these characters to life. Just that level of craftsmanship of bringing Arnold Schwarzenegger's face on top of this metal skeleton. It just, when I first watched Terminator and I saw that, I was just blown away. And it's all makeup artistry. There's no CGI there, folks. All makeup artistry. It's such a high level of craftsmanship that he brings to life.
Well, that kind of brings us to 1993. This is when the first CG characters pretty much appeared on film. And that goes back to Jurassic Park. When you saw the dinosaurs for the first time, I just looked at it and said, there could be an island and there could be these things running around.
They were so believable. First, you just get this glimpse of these gorgeous animals walking around, and then all of a sudden they're right in your face. And it's just gorgeous. There was some animatronics in that movie, as I recall, but the CG work was, they took great care and great pains to make these animals look realistic.
They did a great job on that. Not sure the rest of the movies were all that good.
There's a lot of CG work that happened after that. We went into the first full CG movie, which was Toy Story. And then after that, it was just movie after movie incorporated CG graphics into it. And some of them did it great and some of them not so great. You have to give it up for all these special effects studios. They do a great job compositing things together.
So let's talk about our favorite picks for special effects. So, Adriana, what is your first pick?
My first pick is actually The Cell. If you recall, with Jennifer Lopez, this movie was produced by BUF Studios. They were the ones who did the special effects for this movie. And what I really have to say about this movie is that it is disturbingly beautiful. There are some really gorgeous scenes in this, and then there are some really disturbing scenes in this. They really take you into so many dramatic shifts of mood. The color palettes change, but they make it work. The special effects definitely sell this movie. Without the special effects, it would not be the movie that it is. And they take you really into that haunted mind of a serial killer. When I first saw this movie, it blew me away. And every time I see it since, it still does. You know, these special effects do not fall apart because they were blended so seamlessly into the story. And they are really an element of the story. So I really, really had to pick this one as my number 3.
Great choice. My number 3, I'm going to step back to 1938, Christmas Carol, black and white movie. It's my favorite Christmas Carol movie because there's only been about a dozen of them made, and most particularly for their use of what was available back in that day for special effects. If you remember, there was some flying with the ghosts. There was the spirits that were floating outside the window. But my favorite effect there is when Scrooge meets Marley up in his bedchamber, and he's talking to the ghost of Marley. He's talking to him. He's right there. He's right next to him. Marley is this transparent-looking ghost figure, and it just came out absolutely perfect. I'm sure when this thing hit the movies back then, people were just amazed that they managed to make that character look as ghostly as he did. And for those of you who want to know, they simply did it with a piece of glass at a 45-degree angle and reflected him off of that to give him that ghostly look.
Yeah, that was definitely a technique that was used throughout Hollywood for a long time, where you used either a glass or mirrors to create a translucent image. Definitely a lot of ghosts were created that way. So my number 2 is actually going to have to be the Lord of the Rings trilogy, a Weta Studios production. Yeah. This trilogy is just riddled with special effects, and so many that are not even high tech, like perspective shifts, you know, by shifting characters, angles, and how far and close they were to each other. They created this level of scale between Gandalf and, like, you know, the hobbits, like Frodo. And then they still used miniatures in this. They didn't rely specifically on CG, because no matter what, at that time, even though CG was advancing and was becoming ever more popular, texture was still not what it is today. And I'm glad that they went with the miniatures so that you got this sense of realism. These movies just look spectacular. You really get transported into Middle-earth. They had not only that, they had the miniatures, they had CG elements, makeup artistry, all the orcs, all the different characters that they created, just so many different costume design. The whole production design for Lord of the Rings is just beautiful. Every single species in this movie has its own look. It's just gorgeous. And I love this trilogy, and I think it's one of the best when it comes to incorporating special effects. It takes you really into this story and brings it to life. And Weta Studios definitely always brings a high-level quality special effect to any movie. So this is my number 2.
Great choice. I love the trilogy of Lord of the Rings. You couldn't ask for 3 better movies. I've watched them time and time again, and on just about every measurable level, they are outstanding. So that is a great number 2 pick. I'm going to go with number 2 on my side with Saving Private Ryan. This is based on the opening 27 minutes of this movie that is one continuous shot. It doesn't look like a lot of special effects were used in this. It just looks like a compelling war movie, but there was a lot of elements used there to get this thing to continuously roll as it did, to look like they didn't stop. You know, watch for where the cuts are, which are very, very few. Everything came together. The special effects on this movie, especially in that opening scene, is just riveting. I guarantee you, anyone who's seen this movie does not move out of their chair for that opening 27 minutes.
Yeah, those opening 27 minutes really have you on the edge of your seat. They really bring you into this high, hostile environment and make you believe that you're there with the characters. And one thing that, even though it's not a special effect, that I have to say and mention about this movie is that the sound design for this movie is really what sells this movie, because you're constantly bombarded by noise. And it brings you right into that center point with all the characters.
I think you can consider things like noise as a special effect. What made this movie so compelling is this is based on real events. I mean, this is the real deal, and just can't get any more real than they did in that movie.
Definitely a great choice for this one. It's such a great movie. One of my favorite war movies. Love war movies, and this is definitely on top. So I'm going to reveal my number one. It's actually a two-part because it's the same director. It's the same special effects studio. So I have to combine them, and because they're along the same lines, and that's going to be District 9 and Elysium. These movies, just when it comes to special effects, they are mind-blowing because they are seamless. You do not even realize that they're there. They are so sellable. You just get thrown into this world, and it looks realistic. This is an alternate reality. You know, we're brought into District 9, into this weird refugee camp looking thing, and it's blended so seamlessly with the original footage that you believe you're in a refugee camp. The alien characters are greatly modeled, and I mean, it's so nitty and gritty. The one thing that I have to say about the special effects done in these two movies is that the texturing is above any level that I've ever seen, because it's so outstanding. You get these great gritty backgrounds. If you take a look at Elysium, like most of these spaceships that the refugees were using looked like beat up old cars. Yeah. It's just so perfect. Everything that they chose, the look of it, the design, the characters, the palette, everything came together to blend into the seamless special effect movie. And this was also produced by Weta Studios. I just have to say, when it comes to special effects, these two movies are the ones that blow me away.
Yeah, it's a great choice. When I first saw District 9, I didn't know what this was about, so I said, okay, sure, I'll watch this. The prawns, as they were referred to, are so real. You know, with just seeing them the very first time, I was in. The texture, it was so seamless. I could not pick out a flaw on how they moved and their actions and their mannerisms. And like we've said in the past, when that happens, that's when you know the special effects were done right. Those are two great choices. For my number one, it was Lord of the Rings, and it was Return of the King, primarily because of the battle scenes. The battle scenes are just so spectacular with the hurling of the rocks and just thousands of invaders coming in. It was so real, just so good.
I mean, every time you watched one of those movies, you got chills because you were transported into these epic battles, and these stories have stood the test of time. Yes. Tolkien stories are just, to this day, people find them, read them, and fall in love. And I think that the level of dedication, care, and craftsmanship that went into these movies because of director Peter Jackson and his love for these novels is what really made such a spectacular film.
It truly does. So I think maybe we should kind of maybe wrap things up here on this show. And let's each pick what special effect or a movie or directors or actors made the most impact on us from a special effects standpoint.
Well, I do have to bring up a couple visionaries whose works would not be what they are without the aid of special effects. One of them has to be Tim Burton. Tim Burton has always had this great vision. He has his own style. His characters are always so well done because he has just a flawless vision for them. He knows what he wants them to look like, sound like, move like. And if it wasn't for the aid of special effects, his movies would not be what they are. You look at his works and you look at Edward Scissorhands, it had its own look and it needed special effects to get that point across. And then he went all the way to stop motion animation with A Nightmare Before Christmas. So he really goes from one end to the other. He goes all the way to stop motion with both Nightmare Before Christmas and The Corpse Bride and Frankenweenie. Yeah, all great movies. And then he brings forth some great films also that encompass a lot of different special effect techniques. So definitely a visionary that relies heavily on special effects.
He is truly the stop motion king of present day. And if you've ever looked into stop motion and what it takes, it's literally frame by frame, and they go and they move all the elements, meaning all the characters and scenery and lights and whatever else they're using, and they do this frame by frame by frame by frame. And it takes 24 frames to make 1 second of film these days. So you can just imagine how tedious and how long it is, and his movies just come out just outstanding. Outstanding. All right, when I think about special effects and what impressed me the most is one movie in particular, and that's Forrest Gump. It's because of when Lieutenant Dan loses his legs. And then, of course, the rest of the movie, he's without his legs. All the scenes he's in, the hospital scene and when he's on the boat, and his legs are there, okay? Because when they filmed him, his legs are there. They did not cut his legs off. However, when you watch this, I challenge anyone to pick any kind of special effect used there. You cannot find how they masked this, how they blue screened it, and I know what they used, and I'm not going to tell anybody. It is so, so good and so eerie because his legs are there, but they are not there. And just the way he moves and the way he must have been choreographed to make it look like he was not winging around the rest of his legs. Yeah. It's just eerie. Just another one of those times where you just watch that and you just go, ooh. Yeah, it was so good.
Definitely a great effect. I mean, that movie not only has that, but I mean, they were able to composite Tom Hanks into stock footage of the time. Yeah. I mean, and those composites are so well done that he looks like he's in there.
Yeah, they used that black and white grainy kind of look when he was in the White House, and it's just totally believable. And you know that they're using, like you say, stock footage from way back then, and they mixed it in, and it's just like he was there.
Yeah, it was such a great effect. So yeah, great movie to talk about. Another director that I wanted to bring up, Guillermo del Toro.
Oh, yeah, Guillermo. Yeah.
I cannot talk about special effects without bringing up Guillermo del Toro. This man, every time he comes out with a movie, it astounds me with how detailed he is with the world that he wants to bring to life and the characters within that world. You had Hellboy, you had Pan's Labyrinth. He's been a producer on so many different films. His vision is always there. Even with Are You Afraid of the Dark? He wasn't the actual director on that movie, but he was the producer. But those little characters that come out in that movie, you could tell they have his signature look. Yeah. He has just this vision. His movies would not be what they are or look as gorgeous as they do without the aid of a lot of special effects. Yeah. A lot of 3D modeling went into Hellboy and Hellboy 2, and I'm sure into any of the other movies that he created, because he just has these gorgeous characters that he brings to life. Not to mention, they also rely heavily on special effect makeup. I know for a fact Hellboy is all special effect makeup. Abe Sapien was, again, all special effect makeup, but it's a gorgeous vision that he has, and he definitely inspires me when it comes to special effects.
Yeah, he has done a great job. He's truly one of the great artists, that not only has the vision, but gets the story told and does not let the special effects get in the way or tell the story for him, which I think is so important. Well, as you can imagine, folks, we could talk about special effects endlessly. So stop by Studio 300 and have that conversation with us, but we're going to have to cut it off here. I think special effects are here to stay. I think they're going to just keep getting more and more integrated into movies.
Yeah, I mean, look at Ender's Game, look at Gravity, look at any film made in this past year, and you'll see that the level of special effects is just limitless. The lines are blurring, and one of these days we're not going to be sure whether things are really there or not.
Yeah, I can't wait for what the future holds in cinema when it comes to special effects.
So next show, what we are going to do is we are going to be picking an action-adventure movie, and we are going to dissect it from A to Z. So we're going to be talking about story, action, acting, the visual effects, the stunts, and anything else that we can think of. So we are really going to take one movie and just take it apart. So that's what's coming up next on Popcorn Diaries. As always, join us in a discussion. If you have any comments, please share those with us. Otherwise, we will see you next time. I'm Adriana.
And I'm Joe.
And this was Popcorn Diaries.